speaking of invasions and rocket launchers, we're going to shift to Ukraine. Abby, we saw the footage at the top of the show. Cluster munitions being used, mortars dropping. But it turns out this isn't the blitzkrieg that the Russians thought it would be.
No.
The Russians thought they would play the part of the Germans.
Yeah.
And it turns out they actually kind of are playing the part of the Germans because now they're slowing down, and turns out they're the ones invading the homeland. Tell us what's going on.
They just can't get there. So, all right, buckle up because Ukraine's a mess.
Buckle up, buckaroos.
So there are multiple attacks going all over Ukraine, particularly in Kiev.
Kiev. So I read that it's Kiev. Ukrainians say Kiev. Russians call it Kiev, but I don't know if that's true.
I'll go with Ukraine. I don't know. I've always called it Kiev. But anyways, so they're about 15 miles outside of the city center of Kiev, and the Ukrainians are holding their own. Everybody else around the world is slapping sanctions left and right on anything that they possibly can on Russia. It is their economy is already starting to crumble a bit, particularly because several European countries decided to sanction the Russian central bank, which is a horrible blow to the Russians. And everybody's taking sides. Kharkiv is being bombed. There are just multiple places being bombed all throughout Ukraine. But it's it's already a tiny bit of a stalemate because it's just the standoff of like, Russians keep bombing, they keep advancing, a couple kilometers at a time, but the Ukrainians are really holding their own. And everyone else in Europe is just kind of a little bit frozen, sending money, sending things, but kind of like, well, I guess we'll see who tumbles first.
Yeah, they don't want to get involved in a hot war, but they do want to try to check Russian aggression.
Right. So it's definitely, the game of trying to stop Russians without setting foot in Ukraine. Yeah. So it's a very, very messy situation. The highlights, though, several unexpected players have taken sides. Switzerland.
The Swiss of all people.
Finally,
this is what it took.
The Swiss of all people. This is really what it took. They stood up against Russia and they've slapped sanctions on Russia.
That's got to feel kind of bad if you're Russia. I mean, you got to be the real bad guy to get the Swiss to be against you and take a side. I mean, you got to be pretty bad.
Imagine how bad the cocoa, the hot chocolate that you get in Russia is going to be if you can't import Swiss hot chocolate. I mean, imagine how bad that would be.
It's just
victory chocolate.
And it gets really cold there, so
it's going to be terrible. And so,
but that's unprecedented. The Swiss jumping in and actually weighing in on
it.
It
is unprecedented. Yeah, the UK is also still taking a very, very strong stand. They've had to roll back a few of their statements because some politicians were saying that they were going to support UK citizens going over to fight. So that's how extreme things are getting, is that people are actually using that sort of rhetoric of this is not just, Russia's kind of bullying people, but Europeans are really starting to see this as this is war on our doorstep, and we are in the mindset of actually having people fight.
Yeah.
So it's a very bad situation, basically.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I can just keep going.
No, go. I was going to ask you something, then I forgot it.
But what's an interesting trend that's been popping up over the past couple days is that obviously hundreds of thousands of people have left Ukraine. But it's mainly women and children, and a lot of men are going back to fight. Of course, Ukraine did require that everyone 18 to 60, that they were no longer allowed to leave the country. But then you have people coming from all over Europe who are originally Ukrainian, and they're going back to fight, and they're really passionate about it, which I think is something that's a little bit foreign to American ideals, honestly.
At least right now.
Right. The Wall Street Journal ran a story just talking to some people who were crossing over the border, just, some young guys. A lot of them saying, I've never held a gun. I don't want to fight, but I feel like I wouldn't be able to look myselse in the mirror or face my family if I didn't go back and fight. Like, this is a real national pride thing. A pro tennis player, Sergei Stakhovsky, who actually was a pretty big deal back in the day. But he has enlisted in the reserve, so this is turning into a pretty big deal as people continue to bolster behind Ukraine. And really seem to be kind of in the World War mentality of like, all right, this is World War III. So it's garnering attention from everyone, obviously.
I have I don't know what it is, a thought, I guess, based on something you said that I just think is interesting. You were talking about, Ukrainians going back to fight and how that is different from American ideals, at least as we see them today. I guess my question maybe is, do you think that has to do with the lack of leadership in America? Because to me, like, some of my best friends they've always wanted to be in the Army. One of them is in the Army now, and his whole plan was he was going to be in the Army forever, and he was going to serve as long as he could until his body couldn't do it anymore, and that's what he wanted to do. And he's been in it for 2 years, and he said the leadership in the Army, starting with Joe Biden and filtering down to all these woke leaders that we have now in the military, has made him he's one of the most patriotic people I've ever met, and it's made him not want to fight because they have to do it under Joe Biden. Do you think that?
Yeah.
I don't know that much about Zelenskyy and whether he's a great leader for the Ukrainians, but do you think that plays a role in it?
It absolutely does. Is that there's so much Americans are so soured towards our own leadership that rubs wrong on national identity itself. There's other factors.
Yeah.
Ukrainians are also Eastern Europeans in general, much older history, much more entrenched identities than Americans. But it's absolutely the leadership. There's a clip of a guy and his brothers who were going back from Finland and going back to Ukraine, and he was just like, of course I would go fight. So we have that clip for you right now.
I go to home, my family.
Are you going back to fight?
Yes, of course. Like that.
Why? So
Why?
many people are leaving and you're going
Yeah,
in.
I know.
Why go back?
Oh, but this my country. I love Ukraine.
But I think it does speak a lot towards Zelenskyy. I mean, what have you guys kind of thought about his leadership through all of this?
Well, honestly, I don't know enough about him to talk about his leadership other than just what I've seen in the last, week to 10 days.
Right.
He was widely mocked. He was a comedian before this. I think he was thought of as I don't know that he was taken particularly seriously, but you have to admire a guy who was a stand-up, ends up leading a country. The country gets invaded, and when the U.S. offers him a flight out, he says, I don't need a ride, I need ammo.
Yeah.
I mean, that's somebody you can kind of rally behind.